A private school's program that's dividing kids by race is causing a ton of controversy and a huge divide among the parents. We're going to talk to someone who has two kids at New York City's Fieldston School and tell us why he's not too crazy about what's going on there. Then new information coming out about that Dallas area pool party that got way out of control. Some are saying it was all about race, others saying race had nothing to do with it. We're going to show you both sides, and we'll also talk to a former NYPD lieutenant about it. And we also look at the rise in crime in New York City and ask whether it's really a problem or just something people are making too big a deal out of. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And this evening, we start with a story that's generating a lot of buzz as well as a lot of controversy. The elite Fieldston School, it's requiring 3rd through 5th graders to separate themselves by race so they can discuss racial issues. The program includes 5 45-minute sessions. Now, to give you an idea, here are the categories: African American or Black, Asian, Pacific Islander, Latino, multiracial, white, and not sure. I'm not being a wise guy, that was the last category, not sure. Let me bring in our panel right now and get into this conversation. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Benjamin Hort, Ben's got 2 sons in the program, not too crazy about it. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. All right, Ben, so I get this, and I'm going to give the context from the school as to their rationales for it, but take us inside your house. You got 2 kids here that are, I guess, in this age program. Right. If you can, give us your makeup of your household, and when you're filling out which box you check. Yeah,
I mean, not sure isn't it? We're sure. We know what we are. It's not. We don't want to be categorized in a small category or really put in a box so much. We're a multi-racial family.
So give you the idea of your background. Yeah.
I'm Irish, Jewish. I mean, my father's family's culturally Jewish. No one's been bar mitzvahed or anything that in probably 3 or 4 generations. I actually grew up in the Ethical Society, which is Fieldston is affiliated with. Mm-hmm. My wife's Colombian. Not religious either. Our kids were.
So you could have picked a different box, but you chose not sure because?
We talked about it. My kids didn't feel like they fit into a category, and we didn't really want to have to choose. I mean, one thing is it's fluid throughout your life, sort of what category do you choose or who you are. You don't necessarily answer it the same way for everybody. Is it really depends.
Sure.
Who you're talking to.
Let me give you, I know you've heard this before, let me give you some of the comments from the organizers and tell me what you think. This one coming from the head of the school, Damian Fernandez. He says, "The world is not doing a very good job at teaching the issues of racial differences and commonality of human experience. We at our school believe that we can do it better." I don't think I've heard anybody say yet, Ben, that there was malice when this was set up. It came from a good place.
I think it takes a lot of chutzpah, though, or as my wife's family might say, yeah, big cojones.
Yes.
I mean, to say that you can do what's not being done anywhere else. They originally said that the mandatory nature of this program, that it was being done in other places. There was a recent New York magazine story where they've backed that off. They're now saying we're really the only one of its kind where it's mandatory and for elementary school children. And again, no one has a problem. You don't send your kids to a school like this if you don't want to have conversations about race or dialogue. Or we just don't think it should be segregated, and we don't think it should be mandatory. Or I should say I don't.
One of the kids that was in there, an African-American student at the school, he said, I get to be with people I share my race with. I don't feel uncomfortable about it. Do you think the issue is that people who don't identify themselves on the racial lines, are kind of caught up in this, or do you think it's right for some, or do you think it's just a bad idea for everybody?
So Fieldston is not new to this kind of thing, that it's been a diverse school for over 100 years. I went to Fieldston in the 70s and the 80s. I mean, they had prep for prep. It was a mix. They were always bringing. No one's saying you shouldn't have a support program for children like this. So
you don't like 45-minute periods where you divide them up?
It's mandatory. And by the way, it was supposed to just be the 45-minute periods. It sort of is sometimes they've had it instead of math classes. And listen, they miss classes for other things all the time, a trip or whatever. I wouldn't make a big deal about that. But it's taken over a little bit, and it's become really what it is. It's made a nice community. divisive.
Just a couple of functional questions on it. It's mandatory, so kids have not been given the option of opting out. They can't not take part in this.
It's evolved that there's this not sure or opt-out group where you don't have to declare that you're in, that you're white or black or Hispanic or Latino, and that's a mixed group. My two boys are in that group.
And within the not sure group, it's just they don't touch these topics at all, or
no,
is there?
They discuss it. No, they're discussing them all together. And as I understand it, they're doing a similar curriculum, but they're discussing it. Not everybody looks the same, and again, I think it's silly. I mean, again, I think that racism.
By the way, would you have third, fourth, and fifth? I heard some people say, one of the other parents said, when I hear them talking about, instead of that song, All About That Bass, they change it to All About That Race.
They sang that to introduce the program.
Right, 9, 10, 11-year-olds. Would you have had less of an issue if it was for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders?
I don't think they should be. I mean, I think it can be
discussing.
Think it's
a good idea.
I don't think mandatory segregation. I think that a lot of people fought hard for it. I think it takes a lot of arrogance to say that we should.
I have a feeling Mr. Carter agrees with you.
Well, I'm letting the parent who you already know. I think it's the dumbest thing I have ever heard of in my life. I'm not going to sugarcoat the way you just
more
did.
Polite than I am.
First of all, let's be honest about this. The black and Latino kids at Hostin, most of those kids are there because of a minority program, because their parents can't afford, for the most part, to pay $40,000 and $50,000, whatever it may be now, for tuition. So it's an opportunity for the minority kids, and they get there, and you say, "Oh, we're going to separate you from everybody else. You only deal with the black kids." It's ridiculous. It's the main reason why I didn't permit my kids to go to a predominantly black college, because eventually, as I said to my daughter and my son, you have got to deal with the real world to shield yourself at a Howard University. And this is not to knock Howard or any Grambling or any black college, but eventually you've got to deal with the real world. And so in the third grade, some rocket scientist at Hostin, where I even question the person's motive, that's how bad this idea is.
Yeah, I won't go there, but let me play devil's advocate, which says you hear all about the time about people losing identity and stuff. I believe in the melting pot too, and I happen to agree with you. But play the flip side of this, Andrew, which is you hear all the time people, you get so caught up in something, they forget the roots, they forget ethnicities, they forget about what makes them unique. Is it the school's job to do that?
Well, as we've talked about on the show, no, I don't particularly think so. But I'm curious if there have been any tangible results that your kids have reported during all of this. Has there been any change in how kids interact with each other, or?
I don't think there has been. First of all, I think the kids have been very mature about this and are making the best of it. Again, it's school, by the way. I think school, everything should be mandatory. If this is what the group is doing, I believe that they should all do it. I just think this is not a great program. But the kids, as near as I can tell, the kids are still getting along with each other. And for the most part, the parents have been polite and talking, but there's a lot of divisiveness behind the scenes.
But notice, that's why I'm glad you asked the question. Notice how this parent started out the conversation. We're supposed to be a melting pot. And the university, it's like a university. Its gorgeous campus is like a university. And they're telling you right out the gate, check out, based on what you just said, which box applies to you. I thought we moved on from that. I thought you have a choice where you don't have to specify if you don't want to.
We've also said, as we've talked about this on the show, that this kind of thing tends to happen organically in a lot of college campuses and even high schools.
That's the problem.
Where you wind up with the black table or the Asian table or the Jewish table.
You and I both know that. Right. The black kids go this way, the Latino kids go this way.
Why is this that much different?
Because we're supposed to be working against that. Once they get to college, the black kids only hang out with the black kids for the most part.
There's an awful lot of multiracial kids at this, who have a Jewish father and an African-American mother and an Asian, and there's a lot that don't fit in, and again, how they want to define themselves.
The dumbest idea I've ever heard.
Well, you have one of the other parents at the school, Sunny Hostin, who people probably recognize from CNN. She said, she's Puerto Rican, Jewish, and black. The spouse is European and Haitian. Which box, which table do you sit at? Do you think it's progressive or regressive? I'll start with you and I'll go around.
I think it's regressive, though it's attempting to be progressive.
I think it's
one of those things. Yeah, I think it was progressive intention that unfortunately isn't terribly helpful. I would actually like to see a more multicultural, like how to cross-cultural barriers and get everybody get along.
Started with a blank piece of paper and let people define themselves. It would have been an interesting study. But it's also regret they haven't. There's no study for this. They haven't released any data. There was no climate assessment.
In fact, I heard some people were tweaked because some of the folks who were running it weren't exactly.
We don't know, and they're very defensive. And I hate to bring them up on these things. They get angry and send me emails and things like that. But I mean, we don't know what their qualifications are or what their training are. But we do know that all the other elementary school teachers are on the website. But that we don't know. They have the school nurse. There's a traffic coordinator, an administrative assistant. They're nice people. And by the way, I don't know, maybe they are but we don't know what their qualifications are.
So Ben, given what happened this year, given the attention and largely negative that's been attached to this, next year you think this program is going to be there in the fall?
The way it's going, they're saying that it is, and again, there's been not everyone has to agree with me, but there hasn't been a lot of dialogue. And they say that they're evaluating the program themselves, the principals, the architects of the program, and to me that makes them judge, jury, and executioner, and that they're, again, I'm not sure how they're evaluating it, but it sounds like they're going forward, and it's very disappointing. I've been there for 40 years, and I don't know what it'll be going forward if they keep doing this.
This is a different element to the debate, so I'm not trying to connote this part to Fieldson, but do you think African American studies, for example, should be part of a core curriculum for kids when they get to high school, for example, so that, they ought to know who Carver Washington, they ought to know some names that they're not necessarily going to spend a lot of time on. Do you think, depending on one's race or ethnicity, schools should have a role in giving certain, depending on your demographic, how you self-identify, that you learn something about who you are before you leave? Maybe they don't put you at a different table, but you get something for you. Should that be part of education?
I think that's a good idea, but keep in mind that black studies departments at college campuses around the country, they're dying out because I guess there's no interest from black students as well. So, I mean, everybody should learn about teaching racism in the 3rd grade now. That's what this amounts to. Because when the kids get to high school...
See, but I disagree with the term in that racism is something against another race. I think the intent here, and let me be straight, I'd be with him if it was my kids, but what are we doing here, okay? But they're not saying something against. They're trying to say something or give a forum where people of the same race.
They're doing
worse than that.
It's
worse.
worse.
It's about privilege. Is
right,
a lot of it.
Right. It is.
They're trying to teach kids about their privilege. There's a sign on the wall that says "Got privilege," like the milk commercials. I have a problem with that. I really do.
You're going to teach white history alongside black history? You're going to teach, all of the different segmented histories?
I think we're getting into that.
Yeah, but I think white history is taught every day in American history. I mean, isn't it?
That would be European history. That's
okay, well.
Don't even get me started. We're going to get everyone's comment, but Ben, that was great. I appreciate it, man.
I appreciate it very much.
You're going to have a lot of fun at the parent-teacher conference. All right, everybody. I'm sure you got an opinion at home here. Weigh in on this. Head over to Facebook and Twitter and answer our question here today. It's all about Fieldson School here and the classes separating kids by race so they can talk about race issues. Do you think it's a good idea or bad idea? You want your school trying this? We'll get to that reaction in a coming show. And when we come back, everybody, a little breaking news coming in right now regarding that officer who was caught on tape pushing the teenage girl to the ground at that Dallas area pool party. Multiple reports saying Eric Casabult has just resigned, initially put on leave right after the incident. When we come back after the break, we take a closer look at the story and the various accounts of it that are pretty different depending on the perspective. Stay with us.